But
One. Welcome back to the Fantasy Breakdown Show with my co-host Joe. We are breaking down the Henning Bowl and Friends Fantasy Football Dynasty League. Kind of an ironic name this year, with both the Hennings being our only two 0-4 teams to start the year. Joe, how you feel about that?
yeah, it certainly seems like last year's winner tends to just hold a curse in this league. Um, you know, I think that's a testament to the league as a whole. Really putting a target on last year's winners back, and making sure to get their guys ready to go against the former powerhouses. A little bit ironic, like you
Yeah,
said.
and Everett and I were talking off stream, and he was brought up that it's kind of a Madden curse in our
Mm.
league. Whoever the league is named after, it's not looking good for them. And Matt Henning really taking a lump there because Ryan being the winner, and then the league being named after Ryan Henning, and then Matt Henning taking a lump with that as well. Um, how'd you find ranking the teams this year with it changing to a dynasty format? Did that change your viewpoint, or was it more the roster construction that changed your rankings this year? How'd you go about that, Joe?
Um, I don't know if like roster construction really plays a whole huge. Well, you throw your quarterback and your tight end in, but then after that you just stuff it with whatever you got. Um, and I feel like I found myself really looking towards kind of the flex positions. I feel like that's kind of been the X factor for teams thus far. You look at teams with boom weeks, and tends to come from those guys. They slip into there.
Yeah, I think the depth of team is really playing more of a factor this year in terms of these rankings. A lot of the teams that I see in the middle slash lower ranks of the rankings are very top heavy, and they don't have those guys that they can reliably put in those four flex spots, as you said. I know my team, I'm starting three tight ends some weeks, which is less than ideal. But that's not really my goal this year. My goal is to lose and lose in dramatic fashion. So hopefully the Hennings can start winning, and I can sure up that last place spot. But as you guys can see in the top of your screen, we got Everett for a little conversation later as our last week's top scorer. But without further ado, you want to get into your number one team, Joe?
Yeah, my number one team. I kind of tiered it out because I felt like towards the middle there's a whole mess of teams, but at the top there's one S tier team. It's hooked on a Thielen. Don't have to say much about this team. Um, this team is currently projected to score 153 points, looking trailing week, and apparently that's reduced only because uh, Mixon put up only 17 points Thursday night. So what I'm saying is they're actually having kind of a crappy week based on their projection. They're a little unlucky this week. They only are going to put up under 53 points. They're as win now as it gets. They've mortgaged their future a little bit to get Christian McCaffrey paid off this week. I'm sure a lot of people in this league have other leagues where they've got a share of CMC, so they're all probably happy that he put up a good week. Hooked on a Thielen, favorite to win the championship this year. To be honest, I don't even know why anybody sets their lineup. I don't even know why we're setting our lineups at this point. Hooked on the Thielen is probably going to have a cakewalk. Is what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. They're my number one team as well. But this is a lot to do with what I was saying earlier in the season, and that you either need to start rebuilding or you need to start making moves to compete now. And they were the only team that actually, put their chips in the middle to compete now, trading me two first round picks in order to get Christian McCaffrey. Steep price to pay, but those picks are going to be the 112 this year, the 112 the next year, possibly. So especially when you're putting your chips in the middle, those first round picks don't have as much value, and you're really hoping to lock up that $400 up top rather than stashing your picks for later. So I think Tyler so far has done a good job of putting his chips in the middle and saying, if you want to compete with me, you gotta make a similar type move, and I think we'll see that in the next couple weeks with some of these other competitive teams that are up at the top. Who do you have as number two?
Number two, getting into the A tier. next few teams can, you know, you can kind of rank in a lot of ways. I got Master Bateman. Um, Nick Chubb has been absolutely rolling. He's got Lamar Jackson playing out of his absolute mind. Um, and yeah, I think he also just happened to have Jamal Williams on his team for a little extra oomph. And also Michael Thomas just happens to be on this team and has been pretty good this year. So all in all, this team could probably join the arms race and compete for a championship this year, I think. So yeah, it's my number two squad.
Well, yeah, so Nate actually just got Michael Thomas last week before his injury from me. I traded him uh, Michael Thomas for Calvin Ridley, so next year's version of Michael Thomas, and Christian Watson. So a little bit unlucky on that trade with Michael Thomas getting injured and then missing the next week right away. But you can see that Nate's really trying to start retooling or start tooling up to compete with I Can't Fight This Feeling. I've got them high in my rankings, but they're not my number two because I'm in love with Quad T. Quad T has some of the most dangerous guys on his team. He's got Saquon this year. He's always had faith in Saquon. It seems like every single year Tate ends up with Saquon on his team, and this year was the year to have him. Got him in the late second round, I want to say. Um, and he's putting up early first round numbers. Not to mention he's got Joe Burrow, he's got Jamar Chase, and he's got Jalen Waddle. So he must have gotten Saquon in the third because I feel like Waddle would have been a turn of the second round guy. Um, really can't argue with the production that Quad T's putting up this week, last week, the week before. Um, but also the youth that he has. This is not one of those teams that you really want to mortgage the future in order to compete today. This team's going to be competitive. This team's going to be at the top of the lineups or top of the rankings for some time to come. Who do you have as your number three?
Yep, I got Quad T right there. I think he's right there with Master Bateman. I said there's really a lot to like about the team. They've got the RB1, they've got a primo stack. Um, and somehow Tate made the correct choice on not one but three ambiguous backfields, drafting Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Devin Singletary, and Miles Sanders. That's his X factor. That those are the guys he's slipping into his flex spots that are just booming. Um, and like you said, not only are they just relying on bunch of guys, you know, in their prime. He's got a lot of guys that are kind of entering their prime, and he's probably not gonna go away unless he decides to, really go and push it for this year, which I don't think is advisable because his team is pretty young.
Yeah, like that's the thing with Quad T. He does have those guys like CEH that he could pair with a first to really tear up and get another stud to enter the lineup and really compete with I Can't Fight This Feeling. But he doesn't need to mortgage the future to get there. I think Quad T is in a really good spot, and Tate did a really good job putting together this team this year. My number three team is Dubs are likely. Uh, I am in love with the wide receiver depth on this team. To have Romeo Doubs as your seventh best wide receiver is truly just a masterpiece. Running backs, little bit of an issue, but as long as Swift doesn't miss any significant time, which it seems he does every single year, you're going to be able to fill in that RB2 spot and then just fill out the rest of the roster with those flex spots. And Dubs some weeks is not even going to be a starter on this team, even at the fourth flex spot. And that just shows the strength on this team. This team really could choose to sell off some of its veterans and just have a stockpile of draft picks, or sell its draft picks or some of its younger guys for proven veterans and can compete this year. I really like where Dubs are likely are right now. What do you got at
Yeah,
number
it's
four?
a bit of a dilemma. What do I do with Tyreek Hill? Um, Number four, this feels controversial. I'm putting a 1-3 team here, but I still think that Last Dance probably has the most studs in the league outside of Hooked on a Thielen or whatever his team name is. Um, and I don't even think any of the teams I have ranked below this one could match up to the amount of horsepower if this team sets its lineup week in and week out. Um, so yeah, I got Last Dance as my fourth squad. If they take a couple L's and drop Obviously, each L they take is, can steeply move them down in the rankings. But for now, they're only two under 500. They could easily, if they make the playoffs, they'll be right in the running, I think.
Yeah, this is a team that sneaks into the playoffs and they get a couple straight, good games out of Derrick Henry and they're a championship team at the end of the day. Um, I have them as my number five. No, not trying to spoil anything there. And I just wrote down if Adam starts setting his lineup week in and week out, starts actually paying attention, this team could be dangerous. But my number four team is Master Bateman. I think that it is truly impressive what Nate's done. Taking Najee in the first round and still having this massive or like this high potential of a lineup is incredible. Nate tried to make a championship move by getting Thomas, but I might have gotten the better half of this trade so far. But if Michael Thomas, comes back from that injury and continues doing what he was doing earlier on in the season, it's going to help him, push towards that top spot. Who do you have at number five?
Number five, I threw in Slob on my Dob. Um, this past week was kind of a roller coaster for this team. They had three players scoring under 5 points and three non QBs scoring more than 20 points. And all things considered, the net result of that was 151 points. But then also it was a loss, so it's kind of hard to really gauge it. But um, I don't think Rashad Penny. I'm not going to say like I think Rashad Penny gets that many points every week in that offense, but I think J.K. Dobbins looked really good. They you could say like he only got 13 carries and he was touchdown dependent, but he also had 4 targets, which I think is a really good sign. I think that's a place where this team could gain some upside. And we all know about their young, talented receivers.
Yeah, so I already said my five was the last dance, but my number six was Slava on my Dob, and no one's had you nailed it right on nailed it right on the head. No one's had a more of a roller coaster season than Everett. CD Lamb losing his quarterback week one, and then the team losing its quarterback a couple weeks back with Trey Lance. I promised Ev that I wouldn't make my Trey Lance joke. But I wrote down injuries have really dismantled this season for Ev. If I were him, I would start rebuilding for next year, but somehow this team is still one of the higher scorers this week. Just truly a resilient team. He's got the youth pieces, CD Lamb retaining value. He's got Drake London, who's been incredible. There are some of these veterans here, Amari Cooper, Darren Waller, Cordero Patterson, Dalvin Cook, guys that you can sell, and he could end up with 6 first round picks next year if he starts selling off these guys, or he could use his first round picks next year and pair or first round picks for the next couple of years and pair him with the Treylon Burks, someone who still has plenty of value, but they're not adding to wins now, and he could pick up one of those vets that are super productive. So kind of in that middle of the tier um, situation where you need to decide what you want to do for this year and not waste your time in purgatory. But we'll talk to Everett at the end of these rankings about what his plan is for the future, so we'll get a little bit of insight there. What do you have for number six?
I've got Matonio Brown. This is the team that has Ezekiel Elliott and Alvin Kamara. And it is wild to say that this 3 years ago, you probably would have said you probably would have looked at a team that has Alvin Kamara and Ezekiel Elliott and probably would have thought that team would be winning games because of those two guys, absolute fantasy legends in their days. But this year, not so much. So it's wild to say that they keep on winning despite holding these two chums at this point. Um, I'm not a firm believer in Zeke, but I think Alvin had a 22 opportunity game in Carolina, and if he gets back and he's healthy and he maintains this workload, um, that's some upside for this team. And MB looks a little bit more imposing.
Yeah, I have them a little bit further down, specifically because of those two guys that you mentioned. I think, you know, yeah, Zeke is a couple. bad weeks away or one injury away from being a fantasy detriment, like a roster filler that you can't cut from your team, but he's never going to add value to your team. My number six, well, my number seven would be Ekins and Digslet, Jake's team, being a top half of the league without Eck doing anything so far. Obviously, this week he played a lot better. This has been impressive. He's got Diggs, a legit talent, a legit threat to be the number one receiver this year. Justin Herbert's been the absolute truth when he's been healthy. Jakers is looking at making one move away from being a legit contender. Pairing, first and a first and Justin Herbert to get a stack of Josh Allen and Diggs could be what propels this team to be, one of those top tier teams. Uh, I really like the makeup of this team, and he could be challenging for those top 3-4 spots if he makes the right moves. If he makes the wrong moves, he could drop down to the lower half easily. Your number seven, correct?
Yep, number
So
seven. That's where I've got Jake's team. I kind of said this team gets a lot of production out of 4 players and then 5 players on the weeks where Kareem Hunt falls into the end zone. Diggs and Marquise Brown have gone crazy to start the year, but I think that I'm not. Obviously, Diggs is an elite top tier wide receiver, but he had that 42 pointer that came without Davis. Splitting hairs a bit, but I don't think he's come close to that score ever since. So and then you have Brown's workload, which comes down a notch when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, and you got to mention Greg Dortch.
man,
When Marquise Brown's main competition is a wide receiver other than Greg Dortch, I'd like to see if Marquise Brown is still like putting up the sort of production he's putting up. So right now, for now, they're the seventh seed. But like you said, I think this is a team that's got some pieces it could move around and really propel itself. But
I think it's about time we start viewing Marquise Brown as new Brandon Cooks, a guy who's going to get you 1,000 yards every single year. It's not going to be the flashiest. He's not going to be the most high valued guy, but he's going to get you production year over year. And I, it seems like every single year he's undervalued based on the production that he ends up putting up. Um, Obviously, yeah, Gregory Dortch has been great so far this year, but when Nuke comes back, it's not going to be coming out of Hollywood Brown's production. It's going to be coming out of Dortch's. My number eight, I had Matonio Brown. Um, I think he's found immense value with his later round picks. Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett, Joshua Palmer, wide receiver and QB. No doubt of strength, but running back on this team looks dire, like you said. I don't think Zeke's a value anymore. Uh, Alvin Kamara, he's not much of a value either, and both of them are potential cut candidates going into next year. Obviously, these are rankings for this year, but it looks like a lot of value could be leaving this team very, very shortly. What was your number eight?
this is where I've got my team. Dubs are likely. Uh, I said that I've benefited from some boom weeks in weeks 2 and 3 out of my receiving core. Absolute bust this week. We got J.K. Dobbins coming in and scoring all the touchdowns from Mark Andrews in Baltimore. That has me a little bit spooked. It remains to be seen how sustainable this can be. All the boom weeks. Tua, we all saw that. I don't know like what that means for Tyreek Hill. I know they're saying the same thing about Tyreek going to Miami coming into this season, so hopefully he's fine. But I think that this past week kind of shifted my perception of my team a little bit. I thought I was rolling pretty good up until some developments.
I think you're taking too much recency bias into this. I mean, Kyler hasn't been what we thought Kyler was coming into the year so far, and you still found yourself, 2-1 coming into the week. Deontay Johnson's going to get all the targets always. Ramondre Stevenson, he's still a breakout candidate at tail half of the year at running back. And he's, your running back 2 or 3. And then those wide receivers. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Deontay Johnson, Devonta Smith, Jahan Dotson, who's been incredible so far, Gabe Davis, and Romeo Doubs. Jarvis Landry also has shown some production. And then you can't forget about TDP. Once he steals that backfield from the 49ers, I think this your team's much higher than where you have them at 8. My number 9, I have TaylorMade. First Henning team. I don't know what's happening with this team. I don't know how you can have JT, Olave, Higgins, AJ Dillon, and Tua, and still be 0-3 now coming up on 0-4. Something weird's happening with this team. Definitely going to see some positive regression in the future. Not sure how else to put it. There's no way that a team this stacked is going to struggle for this long.
Yep, I got TaylorMade in that position as well. Or well, I guess it'd be one below you, but same. I have the same notes. I think that this is of the bottom dwellers currently. I think this team has lots of room for positive regression. They've got lots of studs who have shown immense production in the past. So yeah, that's what I got on TaylorMade. I think that they could, doesn't make any sense why they're 0-3 going on 0-4.
And who'd you have at 9?
That must have been that'd have been my 9 team, my ninth ranked team.
So at 10, you had.
At 10, then I've got handcuffs. We got your team. I'm ranking this team here, assuming that George Kittle doesn't outscore Cooper Kupp by at least 4.28 points, and this team ends up taking the L. But man, what if that happens? What if you sneak out this win?
I'll be devastated. I've been trying my hardest to lose. I trade Chris McCaffrey for no points back. Like no players, just take the picks, get him off my team. I trade Michael Thomas for Christian Watson, who has done nothing so far, except get a 15-yard rushing touchdown yesterday in my lineup. And then Calvin Ridley, who's not allowed to play. I'm trying to get all the points off my team, and I'm still have a potential to win tonight. It bothers me.
Yeah, that's what I got.
My number 10, I've got Kiss Me More, steal of the draft, and Dameon Pierce uh, winning that starting job. I mean, or you could say Brian Robinson when he inevitably takes the starting job um, in Washington. That could be a steal of the draft as well. But how do you get the steal of the draft and still end up this shaky from the start? He's 2-2, so it's not like he's uh, absolutely like obliterated. Kyle Pitts and Javonte Williams now not looking to see much production, especially with Kyle Pitts. His quarterback had 7 completions last week. Not looking that good, and then looks like Javonte is going to be out for the remainder of the season. Uh, Pierce, Pitts, Williams, Josh Allen. That's a really good foundation for the future, but right now this year not seeing much production. Who'd you have at 11?
Yeah, I had Kiss Me More at 11. So this past week was 1 part sweet, 2 parts bitter for KMM. The sweet they somehow, despite everything, pulled out a season high total, I think, putting up a good amount of points. But the 2 parts bitter are getting absolutely bombarded by Quad T anyway, despite all the points. And while watching your young stud running